Welcome classic rock fans to another prog foray where we look at the 20 most ridiculous prog albums. Actually, this is inspired by an article that was published in Classic Rock magazine, I think only the other day, called The 20 Most Brilliant but Also Ridiculous Progressive Rock Albums. I've listed 20. I just thought it'd be fun to go through this list with you to see how many I actually know and own and how many of them are actually in your collection. Before we do that though, I'll urge you to click like, subscribe and check that bell to get notified of any future content. And if you appreciate the work that goes into these reviews, do check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the channel. It's always much appreciated. You can become a Patreon. There's a fine body of work on my Patreon now. You can make a donation, check out the Amazon wishlist, or just like the Facebook page. It's all good and all much appreciated. Anyway, this is a fascinating list because not only examines some pretty well-known albums, but also dusts off some more obscure prog gems, shall we say. I'm reminded of a quote by W.C. Fields that says, "We can't dazzle them with brilliance, blind them with bull." Some might feel that that's probably quite fairly applicable with a few of the albums on this list, but hey-ho, we'll have to see, won't we? Well, the one at the bottom of the list is John Anderson's Elias of Sun Hillow. It's a fascinating record. Of course, all the tribes of Sun Hillow are brought together in this spirit of unity to escape the pending environmental catastrophe of a volcano erupting. And all these tribes board the Morglade glider, which was depicted by Roger Dean on the Fragile album cover, if you remember that. They all get onto this glider and they fly off into space, into the outer hemispheres, to look for somewhere else to be. This wonderful exodus, of course, is accompanied by John Anderson's warblings and beautiful instrumentation, I have to say. It was actually released as quite a nice little box set through Cherry Red Records. I don't know if any of you have got that, but it's a fascinating album and a stunning release, I have to say. But there are, I suppose, some of this album could be said to be bordering on the preposterous, especially with the coining of a whole new language in order to present the lyrics in... and I think they laughed, they poo-pooed my suggestion of translating the greatest hits of Neil Diamond into Klingon. That still smarts, but there you are. But a fascinating album. It's obscenely proggy, and with a bit of Tolkien thrown in for good measure. So if you haven't got this, I would highly recommend it. There is a review, and an excellent review, if I say so myself, on my Patreon as well. So do sign up and check that one out. The next one is Aphrodite's Child 666. Now, Aphrodite's Child were a Greek poppy, sort of flowery psychedelic band that had this spark of inspiration to produce an album inspired by the Book of Revelation, as no doubt you often do. Described by Classic Rock magazine as a horrifyingly overblown prog album. Nevertheless, I rather liked it. I had this on CD years ago. I bought it in Russia from one of their markets, Garbushkas. So I don't think it was an original one, but again, that probably got lost or broken as I was moving about. I don't actually have a copy of it anymore. And of course, you get some fascinating textures on this with Vangelis, of course, and Dennis Russo and others all noodling away to provide the soundtrack to the apocalypse. Apparently, there's supposed to be a narrative of the events of this album taking place separately, kind of in a circus tent, while the whole stuff of Revelations goes on outside. The lyrics were provided by the film director Kostas Ferris. If I've said the name right, forgive me if I've got that wrong, but he said he was inspired very much by the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper and the Who's Tommy, as well as some very interesting films like Citizen Kane and The Killing as well, which all brought to the fore to make this rather prog splodge mishmash of impressions. Classic rock has gone on to say rather waggishly that if hell exists, half of this album is what it probably sounds like. Nevertheless, personally I find some of this album quite beautiful and hypnotic when we listen to it. I must get another copy of this. Number 3 is Arthur Brown's Kingdom Come and the Galactic Zoo dossier from 1971. Now I do actually have this copy. This comes in this lovely box set. Of course, Kingdom Come arise from the ashes, no pun intended, from the crazy world of Arthur Brown. It's a fascinating album, all wrapped around these interesting ideas and explorative instrumental forays and that wonderful, wonderful baritone voice. It's kind of like Tom Jones meets Monty Python with lots of segues and asides and sound effects. It's a fascinating album to listen to. It was certainly, I think, embraces the rebellious spirit of Arthur Brown himself. Number 4 is Robert Calvert, Lucky Leaf and the Longships from 1975. This is an album I don't actually own, nor have I haven't heard it either, so it's really glaring omission on my part. But Classic Rock assures us that it's an album of which includes guest musicians from the Pink Fairies and Hawkwind, and we get 11 tracks that are concisely rendered and feature a wide variety of musical styles, even a Beach Boys piss snake at one point. So that's as much as I can actually say about this album, as I've not heard it. Number 5 is Egg, The Polite Force from 1971. Now, I have promised you a top 10 Canterbury albums. Well, in my top 10 list, this album would definitely be on there. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Classic Rock dismisses it as arrogant. I think they describe it ludicrous and pompous, especially the four-part composition called Long Piece Number 3. I nevertheless think it's absolutely a wonderful, wonderful listen. This is an important album, an important band that emerged from a very important movement, which will be touched upon has been touched upon, I think, in Progressive Rock Volume 1, The History of, which is a video now on my channel. Do check that out. As you'd expect from this album, there's lots of fusion and jazz and prog and classical and lots of strange instrumentation all brought to the fore. It's a wonderful listen. Don't listen to classic rock on this one, it's a great listen. Number 6, I've got my numbering right, is Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Love Beach from 1978. I don't consider this a particularly ridiculous prog album. It seems like an album loosely resembling prog from a band that had just run out of ideas, really. I don't actually own a copy of this. I have a few Emerson, Lake and Palmer albums up there, but not this one. But I don't think there's anything particularly ridiculous about it. It's just not a particularly brilliant album. Certainly not a brilliant ELP album. The next one, number 7, Faust, the Faust tapes, 1973. Krautrock is that wonderful German expression of progness, or progressive rock, or Kosmisch music, with its proper title. Now, I am preparing a 10 best Krautrock albums, which hopefully will be with you very soon, but this band would have to make that list. There's a box set that's just come out, CD box set. I don't know if any of you bought that. That looks like a pretty sound investment. But this album certainly deserves to be up there with Can's Take Omega or Targo Margo and New and bands like that, and Amandul. A wonderful merging of these avant-garde textures and progressive rock and psychedelic elements that were emerging from the late 60s and were freely embraced by these German bands who culturally wanted to put as much distance between them and National Socialism as possible. Next one on the list, I've forgotten the number, so the next one on this is Genesis, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. A strange Genesis album. Some people consider it rather ridiculous in the sense that many feel it doesn't actually make sense. But it's a bizarre record that is in part inspired, I think, by Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. It's kind of a merging of 17th century spiritual meditation and West Side Story. It's a fascinating listen. In terms of the Genesis canon, this album wouldn't feature right at the top as it does some people's list. For me, it'd probably be about 4 or 5, possibly. It's a fascinating record, but I personally don't feel it's as good as Trick of the Tail or Selling England by the Pound. That's just my opinion, of course. I do have a copy of this album. I'd lose all credibility with you if I didn't. It actually forms an interesting bumper collection of bedtime stories for my own children. Next one is Gentle Giant Interview from 1976, an album I do not own, unfortunately. I mean, I love Gentle Giant. I mean, those albums, Three Friends and Acquiring the Taste, are just remarkable. Octopus is probably my favourite. I imagine it's probably typical Gentle Giant fare with emerging classical and jazz and chamber music and interesting sort of voices and vocal distinctions going on, but I couldn't really comment because I'm not very familiar with this album. Something I must rectify. Next one is another album that I'm unfamiliar with, and that is Dave Greenslade's The Pentateuch of the Cosmogony, 1979. This album is described by classic rock as a surrealistic, synthesized tour de force of pomp and creativity. Again, I don't know this album. I don't have it in my collection, so I couldn't really comment on it, but I will add it to my Amazon wish list in the hope that I will buy it eventually and give it a damn good listen. Next one is Griffin, Red Queen to Griffin 3, 1974. This is an album I did have on vinyl a few years ago. I may actually still have it on my shelf there, gathering dust. Also a nice folky elements on this. I think I was going quite heavily for a Fairport Convention face, so maybe there's some aspects of that really appeal to me with this record. Of course, it's an interesting album that looks at how the universe and life is kind of unfolds around the central conceit of a game of chess, hence tracks like the opening move in Checkmate. There are 4 compositions on this album. It's definitely worth a listen if you haven't heard it. I haven't heard it for many, many years. I don't even know if it's available on CD, but I must investigate. Next one is Bohanson, music inspired by Lord of the Rings. I don't know this album, I've never heard it, so I've not much to say about it. Classic Rock says that Bohanson's interpretation is so restrained and underwhelming, he might as well have been composing the score to an episode of Where the Heart Is. Ouch. Apparently he was so inspired by Hobbit country, he would later go on to provide an album inspired by Watership Down, take us off to the Downs of West Berkshire. Not heard that one either, so I couldn't really comment on that, but let me know if you think I should definitely check this one out. Next one is Henry Cowan Legend from 1973. Now this is an album that I used to have many, many years ago, and absolutely loved that fusion of freeform jazz, prog rock, and very dissonant styles on here. It was an intriguing listen, and one that my wife cannot stand. It says here that this very anti-commercial attitude kept them at arm's length from the mainstream, and hurrah for that. But this were a remarkable band, a very interesting sound. There was actually a box set available, which you can go remortgage your house and purchase, but they, absolutely intriguing listen. I think one critic said their sound was so mercurial and daring that they had few imitators, even though they inspired many on both sides of the Atlantic with a blend of spontaneity, intricate structures, philosophy and humour that was endured and transcended the progressive tag. That quote comes straight from the Classic Rock article. Yes, this is an album that I own, I used to own, haven't heard for a long, long time though. Next one is Magma Mdk from 1973. These albums are absolutely intriguing. I don't actually own anything by this band anymore, unfortunately, but it was they always felt to me like a wonderful blend of so many different things, from Frank Zappa, Mike Oldfield, and the very best of progressive rock and psych rock and psychedelia sort of merges with this band. This band formed in 1969, French band. If you haven't checked them out, I must check out more of their material. But there are some fascinating textures on this, from brass to opera singers, all sorts of things form this very interesting soup of sound. It's a really great album. This album apparently is a sci-fi story about a doomed planet Earth and a rather stellar chap that comes to our aid. Next one is Patrick Marazz. Of course, I know Patrick Marazz from his days with Yes. The Story of I from 1976. I've never heard this album, but I imagine being Patrick Marazz, it's built around some pretty exceptional keyboard parts, I suspect. It's based around a story, and I'm quoting here, about a group of hotel guests who decide to sell their souls in pursuit of pleasure, no doubt embraced in this very record itself. Let me know whether you think this album is worth listening to. I must check it out. I might put it on my Amazon wish list. The next one is The Nice 5 Bridges from 1970. An album that came out after, I believe, the band had probably disbanded. I think a remarkable album. I think this is the one with the 5 Bridges suite on it. Could be wrong, but it's this band were hugely influential in terms of the progressive rock movement, and to me they provide that bridge, that transition from psychedelic rock to progressive rock. They're that band that are in that moment. I think wonderful stuff. Much championed by John Peel, who mourned the fact that this band transmogrified horribly into Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But yeah, definitely, this is definitely an album that must be in everybody's collection. I think I have it as part of a box set of the Nice albums. Next one is a lovely slice of Italian prog for us. It's a PFM per uno amico. I hope I've said that right. But this is, it's dreadfully amiss on me that I don't talk about this stuff more often. I'm certainly going to try and touch upon this band and other bands like it in my History of Progressive Rock series. Check out Volume 1, which is currently on my channel. But this band and this album are pretty impressive. I don't own a copy of it anymore, but I used to own a copy of it. It was a band that seriously impressed Greg Lake, much to the point that I think he got them signed on the ELP's Manticore label, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely a great album here. Next one is Van der Graaf Generator's Pawn Hearts, this little gem. This is a challenging listen, without a doubt. It's one of my favourite progressive rock albums, I have to say, but it's a very dark, twisted record. Especially that Plague of Lighthouse Keepers. It's a study of terror. I think the central protagonist, loses his sanity, and it's an interesting journey to take us on. Perfectly suited to the very dark, apocalyptic music of Van der Graaf Generator. Some does feature contributions from Robert Fripp, who was no doubt enamoured by the concept and how completely bonkers it all was. I loved the way it meanders and drifts, employing some pretty quite an interesting disharmonic energy for this record. It's a definite must for prog fans to have this, or at least give this album a listen. Number 19 here is Rick Wakeman's Journey to the Centre of the Earth from 1974, where prog excess and capes and curries all come together in this wonderful symphonic rendering of this classic tale, described by classic rock as a terrible trilogy which included The Wives of Henry VIII and Legends of King Arthur. I would disagree with them. I actually love these classic Rick Wakeman albums, and this one's equally intriguing. Also features the London Symphony Orchestra, English Chamber Choir, and features David Hemmings as narrator. Everything we could possibly want from a wonderful Rick Wakeman album. Yes, I do own this, and it is rather ridiculous, but beautifully so as well. And the final one on the list, number 20, is Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans, which I don't really need to say anything about. I've already waxed fairly lyrical about this album already in several videos like this. This was, that wonderful double album which Rick Wakeman insists would be better as a single album. You could argue it's a bit bloated and a bit flabby in places, but all the more to love it for, really. It's 4 sides dedicated to these Hindu Shastras. It's what more could you want? Classic rock described this album as stupefyingly boring. I totally disagree. I think it contains passages of absolute sublime beauty. I don't think it's as tight or as perhaps as accomplished or good as Close to the Edge, but this does tend to be my go-to Yes album. If not my favourite on any given day, this could be my favourite Yes album. So I think this is just absolutely wonderful. Anyway, that's my run-through of classic rock's 20 most brilliant, but also ridiculous progressive rock albums, and perhaps you would disagree with that statement. Nevertheless, I'd be intrigued to know how many of these you actually own or know. So I'll leave it there. I'll just hope you're all well, staying warm as winter draws in, and hope that you keep listening.